Namaskar, friends. Today I want to talk to you about the basis of healthy weight loss and how to attain as well as maintain that ideal body weight. So, the first thing to understand is that with industrialization, there has been a plethora of obesity related problems, the obesity epidemic, what we call metabolic syndrome, which essentially entails accumulation of excess body fat. Now, why this happens is because we live in a world that is calorie dense all around us and that is instantly, immediately available for us to be used. So, the most important thing to understand obesity is to understand the underlying biochemical means of obesity. And having board certified in obesity medicine, uh, I usually don't talk much about obesity or sleep medicine. I usually talk more about spirituality, but this is something which I think needs specific attention from a medical standpoint. So let's try to unpack the complexity of obesity and why we are not able to beat it on a regular day-to-day basis. So understand that obesity is because of only one hormone, and that is the hormone insulin, produced by the beta cells, islets of Langerhans or pancreas. So the insulin is what we call an anabolic hormone. Anabolic meaning formation, whereas opposite to the anabolic is catabolic hormones, which causes destruction. So the anabolic hormone insulin produced by the pancreas causes three things. It causes storage of carbohydrates, it causes storage of fats, and it causes storage of proteins. So, depending on the kind of food you eat, you're going to trigger insulin. The maximum triggering of insulin will happen when you eat carbohydrates. It can be sugars, simple starches, anything that is of carbohydrate origin food. Then, less than the carbs is triggered by use of proteins, and even less is triggered by consumption of fats. So, when it comes to triggering insulin, which is a fat storing hormone, as well as the other nutrient storing hormones or energy storing hormone, I should say, insulin is mostly triggered by carbs, followed by proteins, followed by fats. So that is why in Atkins diet there's a strong emphasis on consumption of fats because fats will trigger insulin the least. So now you understand that fat storing hormone, we call it because it stores all the things, but especially fat because that's what causes obesity, is insulin. So you want to be in a state of low insulin. You want to be eating foods which trigger insulin the least. So that brings me to the second point. What triggers insulin formation the least? Well, the most is formed by carbs, but the worst kind of carbs are the carbs that cannot be understood, assimilated by the body. So these are the processed industrialized foods, the refined carbohydrates, the ultra processed foods that contain additives, fillers. What is refined? Refined refers to the state of the carbohydrate in which the natural chemical composition of the food has been altered by manufacturing techniques. So, this can be converting the wheat into white wheat flour, in which you have removed the bran or the outer layer and the germ or the innermost layer. So there is bran, endosperm, and germ. Those are the three portions of the wheat kernel. And if you remove the outermost bran, which is containing a lot of fiber, which is good for your absorption, then there is going to be too much of a spike in your blood glucose. That is called a glycemic index. How quickly a certain food can trigger a high blood glucose, because high blood glucose is going to be another problem compounding on the carb that you take in. We'll talk about high blood glucose later, but that is detrimental to your weight status because then the insulin is triggered by the high blood glucose. Okay, so that is refined for a white flour. But same way, sugar, like sugar cane, if you remove the sugar and you get this white powder called sugar. That is again refined carbohydrate. Similarly, you can process the fats and the proteins, but the worst are the refined carbohydrates. So your bread, white bread, your pastries, bagels, anything that you find on the shelf, anything that has a shelf life longer than your life and that you're consuming is going to trigger high insulin states, is going to trigger hyperglycemia, is going to trigger the body to store it first as glycogen if possible, if not as fats. So that's whenever you don't understand something, the body will just store it for later use. So that is the problem of this complex processed carbohydrates, not the complex carbohydrates in nature like tubers or starches, but the starches that have been altered or sugars that have been altered, isolated, concentrated, chemically manipulated, extracted. All these states are going to cause an altered, unnatural composition of the food, which the body cannot understand. What the body cannot understand, it stores it and says we'll deal with it later. We will try to figure it out later, and that is why these are extremely energy dense foods that are going to be glucotoxic, and that will cause weight gain, metabolic syndrome, and all the effects of chronic inflammation that come with the weight gain. So now you understand two things. Insulin is an anabolic hormone, causes storage of all kinds of energy dense nutrients, carbohydrates, fats, proteins. And insulin itself is triggered by carbohydrates, but more so by refined carbohydrates. So your goal is to avoid refined carbohydrates at all costs. You cannot eat the processed foods on the supermarket shelves that you are seeing, bread, pasta, anything that is processed, anything that is not going to go bad immediately in few hours is bad for you. So that is why the sattvic food concept in Gita comes from eating the food within 3 hours or maximum 6 hours after cooking. No refrigeration, no processing, no cold storage, no addition of chemicals which will prolong its stay. The same thing applies for all the juice drinks that you have. Concentrate. From concentrate means the chemical composition of orange has been changed. There have been sugars added to it, and you have removed the fibers which would have slowed the absorption of the glucose, and hence the glycemic index, which was supposed to be low, has gone high. So avoid foods which are rich in carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, not just carbohydrates, but refined carbohydrates, and avoid eating multiple times. So let's talk about the second component about eating multiple times. I did not say avoid calories. There is a concept, or used to be a concept, of calorie in, calorie out. Eat small quantities of food, walk a lot, and you will lose weight. That's not true. If you eat processed foods, no matter what you eat, or how much you eat, or how little you eat, you will keep gaining weight. The weight will never lose you if you eat processed foods. You can see a lot of people in the Western world, when they're trying to do weight loss, they will go on uh, non-sugar beverages. They will go on like a zero-calorie Pepsi or Coke. And what happens in that is that the body still stores these unnatural chemicals because it cannot understand what it is. Through evolution, we have never faced Coke or Pepsi. We have only had coconut water. So the body understands what to do with it, but when it doesn't understand, it just hoards onto it. It holds onto it, it hoards it, it tries to figure it out later, and when it is stored in the cells or the adipose tissue, it creates fat, it creates chronic inflammation, and hence all the cascade that can happen from chronic inflammation, including cancer can happen from chronic inflammation. So you have to understand that you have to eat simple foods which are natural, perishable, sattvic foods. High pranic, sattvic foods which are perishable and which you have to cook at regular intervals to eat, or even raw foods which will go bad if they are going to be detached from the plant for long. So next concept after avoiding refined carbs is the concept of eating at certain restricted hours only. Again, this concept is also going to the primitive times. Just like we did not have white bread for the caveman, we did not have food available 24/7 to eat all day. So you have to either hunters and gatherers will gather the food, tubers, and then they will eat it, or they have to hunt an animal and then eat it, and then they might go through starvation for 5 6 days until they find another animal to eat. So the idea is that in nature, food is never available in surplus spontaneously all the time to indulge. And when it is available, the body just stores it because it knows that next time we might not have food for several days. So we have to break down these fats as fatty acids and glycerol, or we have to break down this glycogen as glucose to be immediately available to the cells to be consumed. So for that reason, the body has this storing mechanism, because kal ho na ho, we might not get the food tomorrow. Let's store all the energy packed nutrients, the macronutrients in our body at this moment itself. So you have to eat during restricted portions of the day. You can pick out your 4 hour or 8 hour period where you're eating. You can do 5:2 diet where you eat 5 days and then 2 days you are starving your body. Or you can do a prolonged fasting, like a 24-hour, 48-hour fasting based on your medical conditions. As long as you're not developing any symptoms from it, like lightheadedness or chest pain or shortness of breath or anything that is feeling unnatural and damaging to the body, you can try to do fasting, starting with as low as 12 hours, which is probably what all of us fast at night time when we are sleeping. So restriction of the calories during certain days, or I should say certain hours of the day, allows the insulin to be in a low state. So when you're not eating for the rest of the day, there is no food, there is no blood in the glucose, then there is no insulin. When there is no insulin, the anabolic hormone, then there is rise of the catabolic hormones. And four main ones I want to talk about: the catabolic hormones, which are balancing the anabolic insulin. Those are cortisol, which creates steroids or low inflammation. That is why fasting is a state of low inflammation. Then there is growth hormone, which is secreted mostly during the day, but also in a pulsatile fashion during the day and as a non-pulsatile fashion throughout the day. So growth hormone is also increased during stages of fasting. That's why when you are going to the gym or running, you'll gain your lean body mass, will improve with the growth hormone. Growth hormone, think about it as the anti-aging, repair, regeneration. So if you have osteoarthritis because of bone spurs, it will cause regeneration of the cartilage, the meniscus, so that you will have better insulation of the joint, so you'll have less pain. Similarly, for everything, degenerative joint disease, metabolic disorders, chronic inflammation, all of them are counteracted because instead of fibrosis, you have repair and regeneration of the natural innate tissue of that organ, so that the organ will function better. Otherwise, chronic inflammation leads to fibrosis and dysfunctioning of all the organs. The third one is catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine. As they say, a hungry lion will hunt the best because you are so focused, and that focus is what gets things going. You're extremely sharp in the fasting state, the ketotic state. As Socrates used to say, I fast for more mental clarity. So you have more mental clarity. Buddha was enlightened in the fasting state. So fasting has this generation of this molecule called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and that also helps to create clarity and acuity when you are in the fasting state. So cortisol, gonadotropins, growth hormones, and we talked about all these hormones that are the counteracting hormones for the and glucagon. The last one I want to talk about is glucagon, which is basically counteracting the insulin. Now, what happens when you have a lot of stress? When you have the stress from the disease or stress from mental conditions, you go in a extreme stress state that will increase the cortisol, and that cortisol, when it's too high, will cause too much of glucose spillage, and that glucose is glucotoxic. Just like in a diabetic, if you're uncontrolled diabetes, the high sugar is damaging your eyes, you go blind, damaging the kidneys, you go kidney failure, retinopathy, neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy, or the tingling numbness of the legs. All those things are manifestations of glucotoxicity, or extreme high levels of glucose remaining in the blood all the time to be affecting all the organs. People get this fatty liver. Fatty liver is just a collection of fat around the liver because body doesn't know what else to do with that. So my friends, you have to understand that when you are in the fasting state, you are able to break the glycogen, which is totally absorbed into glucose around the liver, as well as from the muscles, but mostly in the liver, the glycogen is stored. as well as you are able to use the fat and destroy the fat, break the fat, because the fats are broken down. The triglycerides are the fats that are stored and are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. So that is another way of generating energy, the beta oxidation of fatty acids. But in short, what I meant to say is that you're able to break the fats through hormone sensitive lipase, which is what is used to break down the fats in the body. So your stubborn belly fat or love handles or the fat that is lying on your arms, those will disappear. And those are the bad fat, the white fat, because the brown fat is the good fat that you can generate as kids or as well as from cold showers on the back. Those are the good fats that are metabolically active. So in short, my friends, to sum it up, insulin is the anabolic hormone that causes weight gain. So you have to shoot for low insulin states. Low insulin states can be created by eating the right foods, which is avoiding refined carbohydrates. Eat mostly complex carbohydrates, eat proteins, eat fats, mostly fats, natural fats like avocado and olive, but try not to eat processed, refined foods, including refined carbohydrates. That's the number one rule. Second, maintain a low insulin state. Low insulin state is maintained by fasting, intermittent fasting, as well as eating during a certain window and not eating during the rest of the day. And of course, you have to compound with this the idea of doing Kumbha Kriya yoga, which will be activating your Jatharagni or the epigastric digestive power, which is helping you to have a stronger metabolism. Because the third thing which I want to tell you is a slowdown in the RMR or the resting metabolic rate, which happens as you grow older. So your Jatharagni or the Agni is weaker. Your innate metabolic activity is slowing down. Just like you become hypothyroid or sluggish from low thyroid levels, your cortisol levels are low. So the metabolic rate is going down. So your natural trajectory is to gain weight, about half a pound a year as you're growing older. So to counteract that, you have to increase the Jatharagni, you have to increase the fasting, because fasting itself increases the Jatharagni, or you have to do Kumbha Kriya, which again increases your fire in the belly or the digestive power, because that's what the Ayurveda will tell you. But in general, you have to have a caloric restriction in a certain window, not calories in, calories out. I meant energy restriction, eating in a certain window. And don't think about how many calories did I eat. 1,000 calories, 1,500, that does not matter. The quality of the calorie matters. Are you eating food that is isolated, concentrated, chemically manipulated, extracted? Are you eating food that has a lot of fillers, additives? When you look at the list of the food, there's like 1,500 things added there. Then you cannot eat. You have to eat simple foods, fresh foods, vegetables, brown rice, avocado, olive. Avoid hydrogenated oils, avoid vegetable oils. Those things again are extremely processed. So you have to eat the good fats, which we call the monounsaturated, like olive oil, avocado, or the polyunsaturated. You can have some of the flaxseed and walnut. But basically, the idea is to keep low insulin states, avoid the refined carbohydrates, and do intermittent fasting. The longer you fast, the better it is, because fasting not only depletes your insulin, it also raises your cortisol and reduces chronic inflammation, cancer, as well as raises your growth hormone, and hence your repair regeneration is better. You have this anti-aging effect, which is why the yogis 100-year-old will look like 50. So I hope you like this video. Please feel free to leave your comment below. We will do more lectures about the right foods to eat, and I also want to talk to you about the damages from vegetable oils that the industry today is creating. So hope you like this video. Please feel free to leave your comments below. Jai Shri Ram.